Hi everyone, welcome to FX PhD. It's Tim Clapham for After Effects for Broadcast Design, week 4. This week what we're going to do is we're going to look at cutting up some photos and creating animation with it. In the lesson plan I said Terry Gilliam style. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Terry Gilliam. He was the animator that worked on all the Monty Python sequences. Now we're not going to be actually producing anything that's too similar to what he does, but we will be using kind of cut up people, which is where the similarity is. So first of all, let's jump into Photoshop and have a look at some of the photos we're going to be working with. Okay, what I've done is I've kind of wandered around Brighton, where I live in the UK. We're on the south coast, right by the sea, and I've taken some photos of some buildings. I'm going to use those to kind of create a backdrop. So I'm just going to show you a couple of them and some of the techniques that I used. So here we go, that's the Ramada Hotel. It's quite a nice building. Some of them I did in sections, like the Metropole. There's a kind of candy shoppy on the front, seafront, looks a bit knackered. The Brighton Hotel, not the most glamorous. The Pavilion in Brighton, which unfortunately has got scaffolding, but it's still quite an amazing structure, built by the Prince Regent. There's some more of the Metropole. Okay, so I'll just show you what I did with these kind of groups of photos. For the single buildings, pretty elementary stuff. Just kind of created a work path and cut them out so they kind of exist on a layer with an alpha. So there's a couple of examples of that. Now I wanted it to look quite quirky, so I'm not really worried about the scale of things and stuff like that, and I don't really mind if the buildings look a bit skew-if. To build the kind of panoramics, I used Photoshop. If we go up here, we have Automate Photo Merge, and this is the function that I used. If we open that up, okay, the Photo Merge feature does work reasonably well, but as I said, I'm not that interested in getting a perfect result. I chose to use reposition only because I didn't want too much perspective distortion on mine. And what you do then is you just say either select some files or a folder, browse to it. Okay, I've just set my directory path, sorry about that. So anyway, yeah, you click browse and then you select the folder. Okay, and then I've got blend images together here, and then you just click OK. It's going to take a little while, so I'll pause this. Right, it's nearly there, it's working it out now. I just wanted to say that to take these photos, all I did was kind of walk along the street, take a picture, walk along a bit further, take another one. So I didn't use a tripod or anything, so they're not very well aligned. So when Photoshop blends these together, it's going to produce a kind of odd result, but that's the kind of thing I want. I don't want it to look too normal. Hopefully the buildings will be all wonky, stuff like that. And this is the kind of result that you get. If we zoom in a little bit, you can see that it's kind of clunky, it's made quite a few errors and things like that, but that's cool as far as I'm concerned for this project. That's the kind of thing we want. So after that, what I've done is I've again created a path around it. I've obviously moved it since then, just to cut it out. And I've done that for quite a few, so the other one, the Metropole that we were looking at before. Let's just have a quick look at that. There you go, again you can see it's all kind of wonky, not quite right, but it looks great. So once I've got all the buildings cut out, then what I did was I created a montage in Photoshop and put them all together and kind of created a sort of landscape, just like this, so you can see it here. I've got them all grouped into kind of layer groups, so we can switch them on and off. And this was my kind of starting point. So now I've made this, what I want to do in After Effects is take each of these layers and distribute them in Z, so we get some nice multi-planing going on, and then create a character that we can have just walking along. There's not really any reason for this, it's just to show you some animation techniques, and hopefully you'll learn some tricks on the way. So the next thing I did after I'd laid this out was I took some photos of me. So let's have a look at those. Give you a good laugh. So So I merged all the photos into one Photoshop file for now, just for convenience. So there's some of my hands, and some of my ugly mug from the side, and then some feet shots, and then some full-length body shots. And then what I've done is I've taken certain elements from each photo. For instance, on here the arm is too dark, and I've kind of looked through them and thought, okay, the leg's good on this one, the arms are good on that one. I've done that and compiled them all into a new Photoshop document. In this new document I've then again created paths, so here you can see a path for all the different sections. So I've got both hands and a couple of mug shots, and then again my feet. And then here we have I've separated the arms, the torso and the legs. You'll notice that where the legs are cut out, for instance on this leg right, there's a bit at the bottom there that I should have cut off, but you can see here where the leg in front is overlapping it. So the next thing to do is to clean up all these parts. So just by using the cloner rubber stamp tool, I've sort of tidied up all the legs and the arms so that where they overlap they look neat. You need to do this because if we animate the leg moving, then this part is going to show and it's just going to look slightly odd. I mean, it's going to look odd anyway, but we want that to look like a whole leg, so we want the seam to be travelling up here and the pocket to continue where the t-shirt is, etc. So here we go, the next stage. I've kind of repositioned everything. I've got kind of bigger hands than I should have. I think also I'm going to make the feet bigger than they are here. So again, I've repositioned it all and created another document, final document, which I'll show you now. And this is what I came up with. So it looks a little bit quirky. The hands and the feet are oversized and the head. If we come down and have a look at the layers, you can see that I've actually split the arms. So we've got the forearm and the top part of the arm, and again with the legs, so we've got the upper and lower leg. You can see that here, left leg, left lower leg. So I switch these off. If I switch that off, you can also see where I've sort of rebuilt the seam and stuff like that. That just means that as the leg moves, it's all going to look a lot neater. So that's quite cool. One thing that I did do is actually warp the wrists and the neck so that they would fit on here, and then I kind of clone them and join them up. Now, Photoshop has got its own warp built in. If you go Apple T, you can right click and you can choose warp, and you get this grid, and you can then kind of move all these points around. I didn't actually do it using that because I didn't think I had enough control. So what I did for that was I actually did it in After Effects. So let's just jump over to After Effects and have a look at that project before we continue. So to create the distortion on the hands and the head, I used the mesh warp effect. Now with this effect you can actually set the number of rows and columns, and again you literally just click on the points and you kind of move them around. So I've done that on the neck and on the hands so that the wrists come in, and then I've gone back into Photoshop and just cleaned them up and joined them together. I mean, you could always use the Photoshop warp. I just think this one offers a little bit more control. So the last thing I did back in Photoshop after cleaning it all up was just to scale it all down so it's the size I needed for the comp. One thing I have done, if we just put the other head on, head front, we also have a separate mouth layer here, and that's just so we can kind of go, hi there, how are you doing? So we've essentially got all our source material set up. We've got the character that we're going to animate, and we've got all the buildings ready to build our environment. So let's go into After Effects and put it all together. I've separated the Photoshop file into separate documents for each layer. You could always bring it in as a comp. I've just chosen to do it this way, so there we go. And I've also flattened the main montage just for a JPEG. I'm going to use that as a guide to build my comp. So the first thing to do is just drag the montage down to create a new comp and rename that. The next thing to do is to drag all of these assets into this comp, and then I'm going to distribute them in Z and use the JPEG in the background just to line them all up. So drag all your assets into the comp and set them as 3D layers. I'm just going to zoom out slightly. As you can see, it's a bit of a mess at the moment, so the easiest way to work with this is to switch them off and just work with one layer at a time. I'm just going to select them all and press P for position. Drag this up slightly so I can see them all. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to position them and line them up with the montage JPEG. So for the grass, I can just literally pull that down. Switch the next layer on. I'm going to set that to 500 on Z. Okay, there it is. I'm actually repositioned a couple of the hut things so they're not kind of cut off at the edge. But we can still use the montage, the JPEG in the background just to line that up. And then again, the next one, I'm going to put that at 1000. So I'm just going to jump back in units of 500. And again, drag this up so it's pretty much in the right place. So I'm just going to do that for all these layers and then come back to you. So now they're all distributed along the Z-axis. I don't need this background layer anymore, so we can literally delete that. If we come here and look at custom view, you can see all our layers are distributed back, but when we go to our active camera, it all looks good. Now I don't want the final comp to obviously be as wide as this, so I'm just going to come into my comp settings and set it to be power widescreen square pixels. Next thing I'm going to do is just add in a camera, set that to say 50. Okay, that. If we just select the camera and go layer transform, auto orient, and just switch that to off. Okay. Now if we open up the position for camera, we can scrub our X value and you can see we've kind of got some nice multiplaning going on. Now we've got the camera in there, we've got a few little gaps occurring, so I'm just going to reposition everything to get rid of those. First of all, I'm going to drag some sky into the background, and then I'm going to kind of drag that up a little bit, I think, to about there. And now just reposition the grass in the foreground so that we get rid of these holes. That seems okay. If we just scrub the camera, you get a good idea of the kind of effect. So it's looking pretty cool. So now's a good time to save it, and then we'll move. Right, I'm just going to put a small grade on this, just to sort of kind of bring a little bit more uniformity to all the colours. I'm going to do that with an adjustment layer, so I'm just going to go Apple Y for a new solid, make comp size, switch that to an adjustment layer. I'm going to add a few effects, hue saturation. I'm just going to reduce the saturation down slightly, -20. And then I'm going to add in CC composite and recomposite the original over the top, but I'm going to set that to overlay and around 50% opacity. Now I'm going to use CC toner and kind of just use a sort of warm mid-tone here, something like that. Okay, and blend with original, probably around 75. Let's just switch that on and off. Yeah, it just gives it a slight warm feel. It's a little bit dark here, so I'm going to also add curves, and I'm just going to bring up the white point slightly and the mid-tone a tiny bit, and then just bring that back in line there. Okay, so if we switch that on and off, you can see the difference that we've made. Could do some fine tuning. I'm sure you guys can do a better job of that, but that'll do for now for me. Now the environment's more or less set up, we can close that comp, and what I'm going to do now is bring in the character. So I'm going to import that. Okay, Tim in pieces. I'm going to bring that in as a comp with cropped layers. Okay, and then I'm going to drag this folder with all the source files into my PSD folder. So let's open up this comp first of all and have a look. Okay, I'm just going to clear the guides that are on there. Just switch this layer off for now. Okay, zoom in. The first thing we need to do is to set the anchor point for each of the layer. Now that anchor point needs to be at the point where we want it to rotate. So at the moment, if we grab the arm and rotate it, it's rotating around the middle. So if you press Y and adjust the anchor point, you can position it more or less where the shoulder should rotate, and then W for rotate, and there we go, we've got a kind of moving arm. So I'm going to go through all the layers and reposition that. So I've repositioned the anchor point on all the layers. As you can see, they now rotate around the correct point, again with the forearm. And also the legs. So we need to build a kind of parent-child relationship between these, because obviously when we move the top of the leg, we'd like the lower leg and the foot to move with it. Again, with the arm, we'd like the forearm to move with it. So that's just a matter of going through and parenting the relevant items to each other. If you'll also notice on the torso, I've positioned the anchor point around the hips so that we can kind of tilt forward and backwards. So the torso in a way is going to be the main point that everything links to. The thing with, if we link the legs to the torso, when we rotate like that, the legs will rotate. So we don't actually want to link them to that. The easiest way to get around that is to add a null. But we do want to link the head and the arms to the torso so that they stay connected to it when we move it. So first of all, if we select the left forearm and parent that to the left arm, and then parent the left arm to the torso, and then the right forearm to the right arm, and then the right arm to the torso. So if we select the torso now, our arms are connected to it. If we select our right arm, our forearms are connected to it. So we've already got a problem here. You can see the hand is coming in front of the legs. That's easy to fix though. We just drag the right arm and forearm so it's at the bottom, lower than those legs. So now if we select the right arm, when we rotate it, it's behind all the legs. So that's working as expected. So the next thing to link is the heads. They need to be linked to the torso, so we just select head, parent it to the torso, head front, parent that to the torso. I've got this inside mouth layer and mouth layer. Now they're from the head front, so what I'm going to do is parent those to head front. That just means if we move the head front, then the mouth will follow with it. And now if we move the torso again, the head stays with it as well. Cool stuff. So now it's just a matter of kind of attaching the legs. As I said before, we don't really want to attach them to the torso because when we rotate it like this, we don't want the legs to rotate too. So I'm going to add in a null, position that at exactly the same point, and what I'm actually going to do is use that as the kind of main controller and set that up so that we can manipulate all the body parts from one layer. So layer new null, and I'm going to call this, excuse me, main controller. Let's close that and come back to our comp. Just press P for position, select the torso and press P, and let's just put this at the same position, 228 and 208.5. Okay, we can close that position value up now. So if we just first of all link the torso to the main controller, now we can kind of move that around and everything is linked to that null. So we just need to do the same for the legs. So if we just start with the foot first, the foot links to the lower leg, and then the lower leg links to the upper leg, and then the upper leg I'm going to link to our main controller as well. And then do the same for the right leg, foot, etc. Okay. Notice I just did that wrong, and I actually linked the lower leg to the left foot, which is wrong. So right foot needs to be linked to right lower leg. Right lower leg needs to be linked to right leg. Okay, I've reset these to none to make it clear, because I did make a slight mistake then, so let's start that again. So right foot to lower leg, and then lower leg to right leg, and then right leg to main controller. So now if we select the main controller, everything moves around with it. If we select left leg and rotate it, the whole leg moves. And if we select the lower leg, the foot still moves with it. So that all seems to be working okay. Now if we were to animate this, it would be a bit of a pain to have keys on all these layers. You can imagine that the timeline will get a bit cluttered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up some controls on the main controller. We're just going to use effects, the expression effects, and then we're going to link them to the parameters on these layers. So I'm just going to save again, and then we'll do that part. So with main controller selected, choose effect, expression controls, angle control. And we're going to add quite a few of these, so it's pretty prudent to name them well. So this one I'm going to call left upper leg. Duplicate that. Left lower leg. And duplicate that. Left foot. I'm going to just go through and do that for all the parts, and then I'll come back to you. I've added all the expression controller effects and renamed them all appropriately. Now it's a matter of just linking them in the timeline to the correct layers. So if we just press the tilde over the timeline to open that up, you can see I've folded them all down so we can see them. And we just need to select each parameter, hit R, and then Alt click on the stopwatch, and this is left arm, so we just drag the pick whip to left upper arm angle, and then we do the same for each parameter, left forearm. Okay, so let's just tilde. That's not seem to work. It's because I've put two tildes into the expression. Click off of that, tilde that. Let's just select our main controller and just see if this works. Okay, so there we go. We can now start to pose the body parts. So come back to the timeline. I'm just going to go through all these layers and link them to the correct parameters in there. Okay, I've done that. I've just opened up the expression for each layer so you can see. Pretty much the same for them all. You just drag the pick whip onto the correct expression controller. So I can fold all those up. I've actually made them shine. I can shy those layers later on if I want. So a good thing to do at this point is just to select your main controller and just go through each one of these and make sure it is actually moving the right part. Okay, so mine all seem to be okay. Yeah, I've checked through them all and they're fine. So again, I'm going to just save this now, and then we've got just a couple more expressions to add onto it, and then we're ready to animate. Okay, if you remember, we have two heads. I know it's a bit odd for me to have two heads, but there's the other one. Okay, now what I want to do is create an expression on the main controller so we can toggle between those two heads. The reason I'm doing it is just so I can show you a method of switching or alternating between two layers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it with the checkbox controller. So first of all, I'm just going to switch this off and work with the head side. So I come back to my main controller, expression controls, checkbox control, and I'm going to call this head toggle. I'm going to use this to toggle between the visibility of the two different heads. So the simplest way to do that is to link it to the opacity of the layer. Now with checkboxes, the way it works is that if the checkbox is unchecked, the value that it returns is 0. And if the checkbox is checked, the value it returns is 1. So there's quite a simple way of doing this. If we just select the head side and press T for opacity, and I want to just fold this down so I can see my head toggle, alt-click opacity to create an expression and drag it onto the checkbox. So what that means is that when the checkbox is unchecked, opacity will be 0 because that's the value the checkbox returns, and when the checkbox is checked, the opacity will be 1. So that's not really what we want. But we want it to be 100. So if we just put in this expression times 100, what that means is when the checkbox is unchecked, it's 0, so 0 times 100 is 0. But when it's 1, 1 times 100 is 100. So that should now work. So if we just toggle this value here, you can see that that's working. Now it's not going to be quite as simple as that for the head front because we're going to want it to be the opposite. So in other words, when the checkbox is unchecked, we want that layer to be visible. So in a way, this is a little bit of a hack. I mean, it works perfectly well, but it's not so simple for the head front. So how do we go about doing that? The way to do it is using some simple JavaScript. What we're going to do is we're just going to use an if-else statement. So if the toggle is off, then make the layer 100. If the toggle is on, then make the layer 0. So first of all, let's switch our head front on. Press T for opacity. The first thing I'm going to do is just click in here and copy this part because that's the checkbox that we want to reference. Now, alt-click opacity. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable. I'm just going to call it check, and check equals that checkbox. So basically what that does is it takes the value from that checkbox and assigns it to this parameter called check. I'm just going to pull that down, a bit more space. Okay, so that's assign the value to that parameter. So what we need to do now is check, excuse the pun, but we need to check what check equals. So the way we do that, if check equals 1, then do something else, do something else. So if check equals 1, the value is 0, else 100. Okay. Now if we toggle the checkbox, it toggles between our two layers, so it's working perfectly well. So the only thing we need to do with this is just to link the inside mouth, which is this red part for the inside of the mouth, and the mouth. Just link those opacity parameters to the head front so that when this one switches on and off, so do they. So we just alt-click and drag them down there. Simple as that. So there we go. I think we've got all the expressions set up now. So we can go about animating a simple or slightly quirky walk cycle. Once I've done that, I'm just going to bring it into the main comp and have the character kind of walk across in front of the buildings. These layers have all got the shy switch on, so I'm just going to shy those for now because we don't need to see them and we can kind of control everything from our main controller. Before we animate, there's a couple of things I just want to talk about. What we've essentially done here is we've set up what's known as forward kinematics. The way forward kinematics work is when you animate forwards. So if we were talking about a leg, for instance, you would start by animating the hip point first, then the knee, then the foot. So for certain operations, like for the arms, if you were going to be picking things up and stuff like that, it makes a lot of sense. The other option for animating that people use is called inverse kinematics. Now that takes quite a bit more setting up, but if you're doing a lot of animation, I'd definitely recommend learning inverse kinematics over forward kinematics. They both have advantages and disadvantages, but for moving things like legs, IK or inverse kinematics is definitely preferable. Now it's quite tricky to set that kind of thing up in After Effects. I know that Dan Eberts has written an IK expression, and you can get that from his website, which is motionscript.com, I think you'll find. I chose to do it this route purely because it's a bit simpler. Although it's a slightly more clunky method of animating, it'll be perfectly okay for what we want. But if you actually want to get into character animation out there, I'd suggest probably opening up a 3D application and learning how they set up full IK rigs. It's a minefield, character animation. The way that we're doing it with forward kinematics, it's going to work fine for this, and hopefully it'll be a lot of fun. And if it's something you're interested in, I'd definitely recommend learning about forward FK and IK. Okay, so let's move on. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make this comp bigger, because I don't really want to adjust it later after I've started animating him, and his head, my head should I say, is a little bit near the top, and I don't really want that going out, so I'm just going to adjust the comp size. Resize the comp, so we're ready to go. I'll just point out that we're not actually going to be going for a realistic walk here. We're going to go for something a bit crazy and a bit odd, but it should be funny. One thing to note is that I think this leg looks slightly longer than this, just due to perspective. That might cause us a couple of problems, but if it does, we'll deal with that when we come to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go Command R, bring up my rulers, and I'm going to drag this down to create a floor. Okay, I don't really want my info up, thanks for popping up. Now with the walk cycle, there's really only 6 poses that you need to learn, and what we're going to do is go through those now. Obviously the amount of frames between each step determines the size of the walk, so if you're doing a run, obviously the frames are going to be closer together, or the poses are going to be closer together. We're just going to do a sort of amble. So I'm going to kind of set up about 3 frames between each pose. And there's 6 kind of poses for a step, so that's around 18 frames. I'm just going to toggle this head toggle so I don't have to look at my face any longer. And I'm not going to animate the torso or the head or the arms or anything for now. I'm just going to animate the legs till we get the walk cycle kind of working, and then we can come back and animate the rest later. Because we've got it all set up on our main controller, we can use the effects controls for all the limbs, etc., and then we can just reposition the main controller if we need to move it up or down. So first of all, let's set the first pose. I've adjusted the angles for the leg parts, so these are more or less level. I'm going to set a key for each of these. Now I can just press U to tidy up my timeline, and I also want to press Shift P to open the position of the main controller. Now I can scrub the Y value, and I can kind of put my guy on the floor. So you can see that this foot's dipping down slightly, so I just adjust the leg rotation on that. I'll set a key for position 2. So once you're happy with that, jump forward 3 frames and set the next pose. If you're following along with this, then you probably want to just have a quick study of each of these poses as you set yours, so you might want to have the movie in the background. Again, I'm just going to set these. So like I said, you start from the top of the limb and you work down. I'm going to do the other leg first, so I'm just going to kind of pull this up and then angle that leg down more. Okay, and I want that foot to be flat now. When we walk, it's kind of like a controlled fall, so we have one foot that's still and then we push ourselves up and fall forward, and just before we hit the ground our next foot reaches the floor and we do the thing again. So that's what we need to kind of simulate. So the back leg here will just be starting to bend as it comes through. as if we're kind of taking a stride. So I'm just going to sort of position it like this. Okay, and I'm just going to adjust the foot slightly, even if I bring it back, just because I want to have a key on every parameter. Now I can move it down so it's standing on the floor again. Okay, so there's our walk cycle so far. Jump forward again 3 more frames and set the next point. Now this foot is going to be lifting up and starting to come through. Rather than you kind of sit there and watch me scrub these values until I get the angles correct, I'm just going to kind of set the pose and then stop it on each one so you can have a look how I've posed the character. So I've set the right leg like this. I'm just going to bring it down so he's on the floor again, or my pseudo floor, and I'm just going to pose the left leg now. Okay, that's the left leg done. You can see it's starting to look a bit quirky already. If we scrub through, doesn't really look like much of a walk cycle yet. But I'm going to jump forward another 3 frames and set up the next pose. At this point here, this leg will be coming through, so this leg is going to straighten up, and what we should end up is kind of the reverse pose to this eventually, obviously with this leg pointing forwards. So that's the right leg posed. I've raised it up so the foot is on the floor. So with the left leg, this is kind of like the pass-through point. I'm just going to sort of set it like this. Somewhere around there. Okay. So now he's kind of starting to walk. 4 poses so far. Jump forward 3 and the next pose. Notice that throughout all of this foot has been pretty much flat on the ground for all of it. So when you're walking, that foot wouldn't actually be moving and the rest of you will be coming forward. So I'm just going to do pose number 5. The left leg will have come all the way through by now, so let's just bring that up a little bit more. Bring the lower leg across and start to flatten out the foot. This is probably the highest point of the walk, so we need to almost have this leg, the right leg, dead straight here. And again, the foot is still flat on the floor, so we just move that up slightly so it sits on our guide. Okay, there we go. So one more pose, and this is the last pose before the new contact, and that is as this foot makes contact. So I'm just going to go and pose these legs for you. That's the left leg posed, and now the right leg wants to come back some more, and we can straighten it a tiny bit more and bring the foot down like so. I'm just going to add in a position keyframe there. It doesn't need to move much, but it's a good idea to set a key for all your parameters. Let's have a scrub through of that. Okay. So the next pose is essentially the same as the first, but with the legs the other way around. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to repeat this process, but for the other side. So I jump forward 3 and then set the initial pose. I'm not going to go through all of these because they're essentially the same as the ones we've already seen, but in reverse. So there's the first one. You can see it's a little bit odd because the legs are slightly different lengths, but I still think it's going to work fine. So I'll go through and pose the next one. Okay, there's the next pose. You can see now that the left foot is perfectly flat on the floor. That foot's going to stay flat now till the end of these keys. Just jump forward again 3 frames and set up the next pose for you to see. Okay, that's that pose done for you. You can see this is probably the lowest point of the walk cycle, The up-down movement of this walk is going to be particularly exaggerated, but hopefully it will look quite funny. So again, jump forward 3 frames and set up the next pose. This is the kind of passing pose as the leg passes through. There we go. Only 2 more poses to do and I think the cycle will be done. So again, move forward 3 frames and set up the next pose. And there we go. So that's that pose. So we've just got 1 more pose to do and we're done. Okay, that's that pose done. So if we scrub through now, you can see we kind of almost have a walk cycle working. The next set of keys need to essentially be the same as these first keys. So I'm just going to select all these keys, copy, jump forward 3 frames and paste those in. If I now go back 1 frame and press N to end my work area there and just give a quick round preview. Okay, there you go. You can see we've got some crazy little walk going on. So what we need to do now is take this into the main comp and animate it moving along. The first thing I'm going to do before I do that is I'm just going to set all these parameters to loop, because then we'll have a looping walk cycle. I mean, it will be a little bit repetitive. You could actually animate all the steps if you wanted a unique walk, but at the end of the day, I'm not really much of a character animator and this is more just about techniques. So I'll just show you how you can loop those keys. We're going to do it with an expression. I'll just stop this round preview. Okay. So if I just alt click the angle parameter here and then go into the little pop-up where all the expression languages are. The one that I want is under property, loop out type cycle, and if we leave the number of keyframes at 0, that means it will use all the keys. You could actually set that to say loop only the first 3, but we want it to loop them all, and that should work. So now if we carry on going, that leg carries on moving. So it's just a matter of copying that expression and pasting it into all the other parameters. So there you go, I've added that expression to all those parameters. If we just come back and then as we scrub through, you can see the walk kind of continues forever. Okay, we've got a bit of wobble on one of the feet. That's just where it's interpolating between the keys, and you can see this foot here is going up and down over the line. Now we can adjust that, but before you do that you need to be happy that your walk cycle is pretty much how you want it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through frame by frame and I'm going to kind of nudge it up and down if I have the layer selected, that is. So I can go through frame by frame and I can set that foot to always be sitting on that guide. Only takes a couple of minutes to go through and do that, and now if we round preview, you can see that those feet stay on the same Y height and don't kind of slide underneath. So we can close this comp down now, come back to our main comp. If we come to the project window, we can drag the Tim in pieces into the scene. I'm going to set that as a 3D layer. Okay. The position of it is 0, which is the same position, and this is the Z position as the grass. I kind of want him walking on the grass, so that's absolutely fine. Just going to move up slightly. Now if we go to the camera and just scrub our X position value, move across this way, and we want it so that the these layers here are off the side. Great stuff. So I'm just going to select the character, drag him over here and position it about there. So to animate this, I'm literally going to just animate the X position of this pre-comp. The thing that we want to make sure is that we don't get any kind of foot slipping. I mean, he's not doing a moonwalk or anything, so we kind of want his feet to be firm on the ground. I'm going to use a guide for this. I'm just going to drag it in to where his heel is. That's the point of contact for that foot. So that foot needs to stay at that place. So we can now set a key for that, and we know that our poses were 3 frames apart, so I'm going to move 3 frames forward, like so, and then I'm just going to drag that over. Okay, as you can see, it's pixelating slightly as I do that. There is quite a few layers and things there, so if we just solo that layer, we'll be able to work a little bit more efficiently. So then again, jump forward 3, and move that heel so it's in the same place, and again, okay. Now I think at this point, yeah, you see now the foot's starting to rise up, so the part of the foot that we want to keep in the same place, it'd be better working from the toe because the heel is raising up. So grab the guide and just line it up with the toe, go forward 3, drag that over, and again, okay, and that's that foot. That foot's now going to kind of walk, kind of move forward through. So this is the foot that's going to be planted on the ground. So move this over to this foot, jump forward 3, line that heel up again, do it again, and again. Okay, so we've nearly done 2 strides. Again, that's the point where the heel lifts up, so let's line it up with the toes. Drag it across. And that's it. So we've now got the new contact over here, so again we move it to there. I'm just going to repeat that for the whole comp. What we can do when he reaches this point though is we can just animate the camera, or not animate it, just scrub the value for now so that he's over this side. Let's unsolo it and see where we are. Okay, so I'm just going to do that for the rest of the duration, and then unsolo it and we'll have a look where we've got to. Obviously, as I've moved the camera, I'm going to reposition the guide onto this heel, and that's it. Now I'm just going to go ahead and carry on as before. Alright, I've nearly done that, but I'm going to have the character just walk off the side of the screen, so I've scrubbed the X value of the camera position just so I can see this kind of blank space. I can then carry on positioning my character, moving, so he'll actually move off, and then we'll come back and animate the camera, but obviously we won't reach this far across. So again, move forward 3, select the character layer, drag that forward. I'm going to just solo that layer and just carry on animating the position across. So I've done that. As you can see, he's gone past the end. If we scrub back, you can see he walks across. Cool. So let's go to the beginning. Let's set up the camera. So we want to come all the way back here, somewhere around here. Set a position key for that. Let's come along here and scrub the other way. And that needs to probably be around there. So I think the character's going to kind of walk off the end before we want him to, but I think that's probably okay. Let's just select those and ease those so the camera kind of eases out of the start position and then eases in at the end. Yeah, see, it is a little bit, he does kind of go off the side. So we'll just take this end key and drag it down to say there, and then we'll at least see him as he disappears off the side. Okay, so let's just do a quick round preview and see where we've got to with that. Okay, it's round previewing now. As you can see, as the foot here makes contact, there's no slippage on the grass at all. It's working pretty well. So it all looks good so far. And there it is playing back. It's quite a quirky walk, it's quite funny. It looks a bit stiff at the moment because the arms and the still and the torso and everything isn't moving. We've got some quite nice multi-planing going on in the background. So I'm quite happy with that for now. It's just a matter of going back into the character composition and animating the arms and the torso and such. Rightio. So open up the Tim in Pieces, the character comp, or whatever you may have called yours. And now I'm going to animate the arms swinging. Now the arms normally oppose the legs. So let's do that. Let's just fold up these parameters first of all. In fact, actually, let's just select this and press E because we want to see our arm parameters. Okay, I'm going to fold these down. There's only 4 parameters to key here. So let's set these up. Again, you start with the upper arm first. So the left arm needs to be forwards because it's the left leg that's back. So I'll just animate the upper arm, position that, and then position the forearm. And again, for the right arm, it's going to kind of be something like this. So we set keys for these, and then jump forward 3 and then reposition them. So I've done that. I'm just going to move forward 3 again and then reposition them. Basically this arm's going to swing round and that arm's going to swing round there. So when the legs are opposite, then the arms will be in the opposite position to this. I'm not going to sit here and key it all while you watch, so just bear with me and I shall set up a few keys and show you the poses that I've set. I've done the first cycle, so you can see that the keys here and the positions of the arms are kind of mirroring that first point. So now we have his arms swinging as he walks. It's just a matter of repeating that again over the next set of keys, so that obviously we get the loop the same way we did the legs. To set the last keys, again, don't forget you just need to copy and paste these like so. And I think that's probably fine to just tween that bit there. So let's have a look at that. Okay, not too bad at all. So as before, we need to set up a loop on those. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it into all the arm parameters. Here's a quick round preview. Now we've got the arms swinging. It's looking like a pretty funky walk there. Chilling out on a Sunday. Okay, so now I'm just going to add a bit of a rotation to the torso and we're pretty much done. So scroll down and fold down the torso, set a key for the angle. I'm not going to do this on every key, I'm going to do it on every other key that we set before. And now, because he's kind of falling forward, let's set that to -10. Jump forward. And here he's at his highest point, so you'd kind of almost be leaning back slightly there, like so. And then back here, we'd be back to 0 again. Now if we just alt-click the angle and paste the same loop expression in there, we should have his torso rocking backwards and forwards as well. So there you go. That's all working fine. Obviously it's quite exaggerated, this walk. The more you exaggerate it, the funnier it is. I think it's looking quite funny as it is. If you remember, we've got 2 heads, so I'm just going to kind of have me look at you lot halfway through and then turn back and then we'll have a look at it in the final comp. So fold this up. Here we've got our head toggle. Notice we've also got a head angle actually. I haven't animated that, but you could have him kind of banging his head or something, whatever. I'll leave that up to you if you want to do that on yours. So when we check this, our head turns round, which is great. So if we just say move to around here, first of all let's set a key at the beginning, and then move to around there. Okay, that looks cool. Come to around here, switch it off again. So now as we scrub through, the head turns. And seeing as we made the mouth separate, let's just unshy our layers. There's mouth. I'm just going to switch the shy off for that and shy them again. So if I just solo that, when we move along here, you can see there's the mouth. Cool. Hit P for position. At this point I'm going to set a key, then I'm going to jump forward 10, and we can drag the Y value and we can open the mouth. Okay, maybe not quite as low as that. It does look a bit horrific, to be honest, but oh well. I'm going to come to this key here where the head turns back and copy this first keyframe, jump back 10 and just copy this keyframe to there. So the mouth will open from here to here, stay open and then close. We can just click those, press F9. So it's kind of eases. The other thing I'm going to do is do that to the torso. Let's just ease those keys. Right, so let's just have a quick look and see what that looks like. Bit odd. There you go. So really, that's done. We could switch on motion blur for this if we wanted to. And obviously we need to enable it for all the layers. So I'll have to unshy those. Select all, switch on motion blur. Not sure if motion blur really works with this technique, but we can always toggle it on or off. It's sometimes worth checking because it smooths out things, stops flicker quite a lot. So let's jump back to the main comp. I'm going to drag it down so you can see the whole thing. Switch on motion blur in here. Again, I need to toggle that for all the layers. Doesn't matter for this one because motion blur is enabled in the pre-comp. Now it should work that out. And get a tiny bit of blur on the background as well. There we go. See, it may be too blurry for the character, but let's do a RAM preview, final one, and have a look at the final result. Here's the final RAM preview. So that's the end of this class. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did making it. It's pretty funny. Hopefully it's inspired you to kind of animate some photographs and things. In this lesson we've kind of learnt cutting up our buildings, setting them in Z depth to get some multiplaning, dissecting the character, setting all the anchor points, linking them with expressions, and then finally a really basic walk cycle. I hope that was a lot of fun for you guys. I look forward to giving you your next assignment. It should be fun, so get your cameras ready. Other than that, this is Tim Clapham signing off for another week. Have a great time. See you on the forums.